Many thanks for staying with us. Now, let's move to another developing story in Nigeria, where we understand that legal practitioners have called on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to take further action after his directive for the release of the minors arraigned before the Federal High Court in Abuja over their involvement in the hashtag End Bad Governance protest. Now, Justice Obiora Egwatu of the Federal High Court in Abuja had dismissed the case against the protesters following an application by the Attorney General of the Federation. Upon their release, the Vice President, that's Kashim Shettima, advised them to turn a new leaf and build responsible futures for themselves. Now, let's listen to some of the things the Vice President did say in that event.
100 billion naira was lost in the protest, consisting mainly private property through looting and loss of business. I will urge you, I will advise you, you are our children, to use the opportunity of the President's magnanimous gesture in ensuring that you go back home and become responsible citizens. I will urge our governors and our elected representatives here that cut across political divides. What binds us together as citizens of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Now joining me on the program is Sanusi Bature, is the spokesperson to the Kano State Governor. He, of course, joins virtually. I also have Olufemi Lawson, a public affairs analyst, who joins me live in the studio. Thank you for your time, gentlemen.
Good evening, Doctor. Thank you for having me.
All right, great. It's great to have you. Now, let me start with you, Ms. Lawson. I mean, this move by the government to detain these kids elicited reaction. I would like to know what you think about holding these kids in prison for 90 days plus.
Well, to start with, you know, a lot of times when we say kids, we must be conscious of our definition. A lot of persons who have spoken on this subject matter have classified these young people as kids. Some have classified them as minors, based mainly on, of course, the child rights, you know, laws, both nationally and internationally. I've listened to a lot of persons, especially those lawyers who have volunteered, you know, to speak on behalf of these young people, referring to them as minors. But even the UN Convention on Child Rights, you know, define 18 and below as, of course, children. But that same convention, if you have read through the UN Convention on Child Rights, Section 43, also empowers each state that are signatory to that convention to prescribe, according to their own peculiarity, what should be the limits, you know, of how we can classify a young person as a child who can enjoy that internationally, you know, recognized. For in the case of Nigeria, of course, it is in our penal code that if you are 7 years and below, you may be presumed to be, you know, ignorant of the law in whatever, you know, crime you are culpable of, whatever crime you are involved in. But our law actually empowers the state to prosecute any individual above 7 years for any offenses committed, to be culpable for any offenses committed if they are older than 7 years. And let me remind you, that is why you have the juvenile correctional centers, which we used to call the prisons, you know, and that the government held them for. I don't want to discuss the validity or otherwise of the allegations, particularly the allegations of treason against these. But the truth is that I'm happy that, you know, the Vice President said this in his intro. We were here in Lagos. I was in the studio here during the August protest. We were here together, you know, analyzing the protests across the state. There were protests across the state of the South. There were protests even in some states of the North, including Sokoto State and the like. But it got to a point that this protest became a looting spree that people were not even targeting government warehouse like we saw during a particular protest in Nigeria, but people were targeting private businesses, people were targeting property belonging to private. In actual fact, I saw, unfortunately and funnily, how young people went and looted pharmacies in Kano, and you begin to wonder why people want to steal drugs. So those were the issues around the August protest that involved the majority of these people that were arrested. And the police made this statement, but because a lot of us seems not to be interested in the course of the arrest and the trial, that from the time they were arrested, the police made move to get an order to get these persons remanded. But the correctional service, particularly in Abuja, insisted that it has no space to accommodate these young people. And that is why the police resorted into keeping them pending trial. Pending trial, not just keeping, and of course I read a lot about this. I read statement from the police. I even read statement from some of their lawyers. And it was confirmed that these people were kept in a separate cell, even though the day that the whole scenario became exposed to a lot of Nigerians who were not following, because I was following prior to the appearance in court when we saw all those drama, they were kept separately. They were not kept with people who were presumed to be
either. Were they properly fed?
Well, of course, the police came up. I was not in the detention facility. But if we want to assume that somebody can come out and tell us that, well, none, if you take note, if you took note rather, none of these persons, none of these young persons spoke about not being properly fed.
But they fainted in court, and they were looking malnourished.
Reported by a third party. In other words, the first report about this was on the social media through one.
But there are videos.
Yeah, yes.
Of the kids on the floor.
How do you actually confirm that somebody has not eaten actually if he has actually
foaming through the mouth? And they looked visibly malnourished.
Well, the police claimed that they were fed, they were kept in different, confinement, and most importantly, we should also query why there were no correctional facilities to keep these children. Because the police does not really have the facility. In fact, even the police, if not that the correctional facilities have rejected these children, I don't think the police even have the power to detain people unnecessarily for that number of days without taking them through
the due process.
Yes.
But I mean, this, of course, for many Nigerians, pretty much disturbing. And many are asking, what kind of image does this project Nigeria to the rest of the world? But let me bring in Sanusi Bature, who was the spokesperson to the Kano State Governor, into the conversation. Sanusi, I would like to ask you, right, your reaction to the detention of these kids, particularly from the angle of the government of Kano State.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think, first of all, the arrest of these 76 children of Kano State happened in August and without the notice of His Excellency, the Governor of Kano State, probably at that time because the police and Kano State government were having some little crisis. And having heard about the arraignment of these children by the Governor of Kano State, he quickly issued a statement confirming to the public that he will do everything humanly possible to make sure that they are freed. And subsequently, he engaged all the volunteer human rights lawyers who were pursuing the case in favor of the children. His Excellency engaged them, and then he also directed the State Ministry of Justice to also intervene. And immediately when the pressure was high, then luckily the federal government decided to withdraw the case against these children. So, of course, like you mentioned, these children are malnourished, taunted, and they look so emaciated. And it's a sign of pity that they really were not taken being taken care of very well. So what we did from the Kano aspect is that first we received them from the Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, And His Excellency appreciated the good gesture from the President because he heeded to the good counsel, the advice, the agitation, the appeals from the various categories of stakeholders within and outside Nigeria. Because it's a sign of good leadership that if a leader is advised and it accepts that advice to do the right thing, then you have to appreciate that. So therefore, we appreciated the President. But for the case of Kano, because we're having the largest number of those victims, His Excellency went to receive them himself personally, and he took them back to Kano by air, not even by road, because the situation they are, they need physical and mental rehabilitation. And on that very day, we brought them back to Kano and took them to a facility, which is Kano Cancer Center. It's a newly built health facility which has not been put in use. So therefore, they were allocated bed spaces in that hospital. About 20 medical doctors were allocated, both the psychiatric doctors and physicians, to make sure that they check them off and ensure that they are physically and mentally fit. His Excellency is currently keeping them at that facility until probably the next couple of days to ensure that they are all safe. They are being fed in that place. We saw them new clothes. They were given some counsel, and above all, the Commissioner of Education was directed to go and screen them to ensure how many of them were not in school, how many of them completed secondary schools. And at the moment, from the preliminary report, about 7 of them have completed secondary schools. And they have
seven out of how many? 7 out of the 73?
Yes, 7 out of the 73.
Just 7 have completed secondary schools. Secondary school.
Yes, yes, with a good result. Many of them completed secondary school, but without good results. But 7 have good results that they can be enrolled into university or polytechnic, and the governor has promised to do that. And then some of them who have not completed secondary schools or have a very low result of SSCE will be given the second chance opportunity to write SSCE in a preliminary way, so that they can also be useful to themselves. And those at the primary school and in secondary school.
Mr. Sanusi Bature, it looks like we
will be also supervised to their under the guide of the Ministry of Education. And then some of them who have either graduated from secondary school or are not interested to go back to school will be given the opportunity to train them on a particular skill of their choice, and then a startup capital will be given to them so that they can begin a new life. In essence, His Excellency is determined to reintegrate those children, rehabilitate them, and then send them back to the society as useful members of the society.
All right, thank you so much for that. But right now we need to go on a quick commercial break. When we return, of course, we'll definitely pick up in terms of what, does this reflect, or does this really reflect a deeper issues, particularly within the minors, space in the country? What needs to be done to avert issues like this in future? Stay with us. Many thanks for staying with us. This is still Politics HQ on News Central Television, and we are looking at, of course, the fallout of the release of the minors which were detained, after the #End Bad Governance protest, and were accused of treason. We know that the president did intervene and asked for their immediate release. That already has happened. I still have my guest with me. Sanusi Bature is the spokesperson to the Kano State Governor. And also I have with me Femi Lawson is live with me in the studio, who of course is a public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Let me come back to you, Femi. I mean, let's look at this beyond the kids. This is a reflection, according to many Nigerians, of something really deeper. Looking at the number of kids involved, or number of minors involved, one would ask deeper questions as regards the state of education, parenting, family, and for that side, of the country, issues even around the Almajiri system comes up. I'd like you to speak on this.
Sincerely, I'm disturbed, just like every other person, that, we used to talk about over 10 million, but now close to 20 million of our children across the country out of school. Very alarming, not just out of sympathy to these children, but the consequences of having even 10 million of your children that you should be preparing for the future out of school. It's an atomic bomb waiting to explode for any society. But I would not want to deeply go further into that without first and foremost appreciating Mr. Sanusi, acknowledging his sincerity in his approach to this conversation. A lot of times before now, people have described the treatment of these young people. I refer to them as young people, and I repeatedly do that because I'm not consciously, convinced to refer to them as minors. Among these minors, the spokesperson to the governor of Kano have identified at least 7 of university age. I've identified some who have even written senior secondary school exam that have not passed. I've identified some who are, old enough to be equipped for vocational, purposes, empowerment, as the case may be, So I think this is enough call on those who have joined the mob in actually describing these young people as minors and that they could not have been tried, and they like, to be cautious, especially when you look at how far we've come to attack the police, which has the prosecutorial power by the Constitution to investigate people and try them for offenses. Going back to the issue of the role our society is playing, the society is failing, and a lot of times we all sit down and look forward to Abuja. It is expected that as much as the expectations from the president or whoever is in Abuja, as the case may be, what are we doing as parents, just like you identified? What are we doing as communities? What are we doing as local government, as states? I've lived in Zaria before, so I can confidently tell you that if you bring 73 of those children on board today, I can tell you that it will be very difficult for you to identify the homes of at most 20 of them. These are children who from 3, 4 are left on the streets to go and fend from themselves. When former President Jonathan came, he tried to correct the Almajiri system and introduce the modern day education into it. A lot of people rose up against it. The consequences are what we are seeing today. If you look into the data of the majority of those young people that are involved in this trial and all these controversies, these are people who have lived all their lives on the streets because the family abandoned them, the society abandoned them. Because truly, if parents can't cater for their children's basic education, the state ordinarily should statutorily be able to empower a child at least with basic education. But if parents are failing, what are the states doing? The states have also failed. What's the state of primary education in the north? What's the state of primary education in Kano, Kaduna, Sokoto, as the case may be?
Quickly, in 30 seconds. Well, I would like you to speak also on, because this has also come up, the Almajiri system, particularly in the northern part. Many have said that maybe that system should be, in a way, revisited.
Well, I would not say it should be abolished because it's more like a cultural system in the north. I haven't lived in the north. But I think by now, there should have been an upgrade in modernization. And that was what former President Jonathan intended in 2014 or thereabout when he introduced the Almajiri schools. A lot of those schools were built across the states of the north. But I can tell you today, I'm not sure 1 or 2 of those schools are functional. We can take our children through the religious, schools, get them trained, but they must have the basic educations. But today, the basic educations are no longer available. From 10 million, rather than reducing, despite the effort of government to put more of our children in school, we are increasing in figures in the number of children that are out of school in 2024, for God's sake. And how do you expect that when there's a call for a peaceful protest, that people march to Ojota to sit in the garden and dance to the DJ music, drink soft drink water, and eat snacks? In the other side, people were looting to the extent that people looted pharmacies. And because we say they are minors, as we have been describing, the police should look the other way, and people should not be caught.
But shouldn't this be shouldn't it have been handled differently or in a better way, better fashion?
It was handled differently. And you see, but if there's anything that has attracted me to the current leadership of the Nigerian Police Force, it is the fact that I'm hoping that one day I'll be able to meet those in the hierarchy of police and give special commendation to them, particularly the Inspector General of Police. Today I was listening to the first spokesman, how police officers, I'm not talking of the rank and file, police officers in the rank of the top hierarchy of police are going to be prosecuted for taking bribe. You and I know that it has not. You see, the current leadership of the police has shown commitment to ensure that the job is done in a manner that respects the right of the ordinary people, that respects the right of the citizens. Okay. In the past, we were here when young people protested in Lagos, and someone somewhere after drinking excess of coffee ordered that they should be fired. But in this case, rather than encouraging his men and officers to go and unleash violence on these young people, they were rather taking all the streets into custody. All
right, but I'm afraid we need to go. Maybe we'll come back and revisit the conversation around the police, because even as with the commendations, you're saying Nigerians, many of them still endure harassment daily. But thank you so much.
Mostly based on the antecedent before.
Thank you so much for your time on the program. Olufemi Lawson, a public affairs analyst. Thank you. Also, at some point, we had Sanusi Bature, the spokesperson to the Kano State Governor, joining us. Gentlemen, I'd like to appreciate you one more time. Well, this is where we drop the curtains on today's episode. In case you missed out, you can actually catch up on our YouTube platform. That's News Central TV. You can also follow us across social media with the same name, News Central Television. You can follow me personally at Dakbo, at Digboye. Until I come your way again, the opinion of our guest remains there and that of News Central. Good night.